Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of council to order and ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. We do have quorum, moved by Councillor Martman, seconded by Councillor Bonner. All those in favor, raise your hands, please. And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the January 17th, 2022 regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. And as the province is now in phase 3 of their opening plan, this meeting is being conducted electronically. However, question period has been reinstated for those in attendance for agenda items only. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors in the Shaw Auditorium at the Vancouver Island Conference Centre. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of question period, the chair will call those who have signed up to the podium to address council. Before I get to the introduction of late items, I want to state what is obvious to those of you who are here and those watching from home. There has not been a coup at City Hall. I am not in charge. Council is all in attendance electronically tonight because committee and council meetings have been changed for this month in response to COVID-19. What that means is all council and committee meetings for the month of January 2022 will be held virtually. The public hearing dates scheduled for January 20th and 24th have been postponed. Staff will continue to monitor and reevaluate the situation later this month for future meetings. And registered delegations are encouraged to attend meetings via Zoom, but public attendance is still permitted. We do have some members of the audience here tonight who will be a part of delegations, I believe, and others will be appearing by Zoom, and that is much appreciated in the circumstances. So the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, when we have several.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. For late items this evening, Agenda item 12E, development permit application number DP001204 for 25 Spyglass Lookout, adding delegation form for Mark Kelly, and adding delegations from Greg Herringer, Jurgen Goring, James McQuarrie, and pardon me if I get any of these pronunciations wrong, John Sinclair, Corinne Brolwicks, or forgive me, Alfredo Tura, and Christina Nickel. And I'm very sorry about that. And that's it for late items, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. A motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Seeing Councillor Thorpe's hand, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. A motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the Mayor's report. I have a number of things to talk about tonight, but I will try and be brief. The first item is the source of much discussion over the last couple of weeks, and that is the collection of garbage. This week we will be continuing to collect extra garbage and recycling to make up for the missed collection days since Christmas Day, extra recycling on recycling days, and extra garbage on garbage days. We're going to be handling that by having on our recycling routes 5 trucks go on the go, each with an extra worker for the day. When the automated truck empties each blue cart, the extra recyclables are then manually dumped into the empty blue cart for a second tipping. On our garbage routes, we have 4 of our city trucks collecting from the black and green carts as usual, and to handle the extra garbage bag that some homes put out, we have 2 dump trucks, each with 2 operators, working the routes and manually tossing the garbage. We expect collection days to be longer than usual, obviously, and crews may need to work into the evening. So please keep your carts and extras out until collected. Also note that additional garbage on your garbage day is being picked up by a separate crew and truck, so it is important the extra bag is placed 1 meter beside or behind the cart. Also happy to announce that as of today, the main 25-meter tank at Bevan Park Pool is open. There have been several improvements, including new tiling in the washrooms, LED lighting upgrades, water-efficient taps, and overall painting found throughout the facility. In addition, an accessibility audit was completed last year that should help the city determine ways to enhance everyone's ability to access the pool amenities found at Bevan. And I can certainly happily announce that leak issues appear to have been solved. Otherwise, we were looking at a pretty significant expense on behalf of the city. I also wish to confirm that the complete street upgrades on 4th Street will be starting soon. 4th Street will be closed between Bruce and Pine Street. Detours will be in effect for the duration of the project. Phase 1, covering 4th Street between Harewood Road and Pine Street, will start construction in January 2022 and be completed by the summer of 2022. Obviously, complete streets are designed for everyone, and it will increase the safety and comfort for people who walk, bike, take transit, and drive. And we're very pleased to have the Government of Canada having contributed $750,000 to the project through the Canada Community Building Fund. And now I want to say something about a source of a great deal of emails during the Christmas time and through the first few days of this year, obviously, and that is the snow and grading of streets and shoveling of sidewalks and those things. I firstly want to extend a very sincere thanks to the city crews who worked very long hours in very challenging circumstances, day after day, trying to deal with what is a quite unprecedented snowfall. We haven't had a substantial snowfall. I think the last one was 2008, and then prior to that, 1996. As was obvious for those who watched the news, this was an issue up and down the coast, across the province, north, south, east, and west. But we were in a particularly deep snow belt, and depending on where you were, the totals were between roughly 85 and 110 centimeters. I appreciate the frustration that the public felt, but we have a very organized system to deal with our streets based on consultation with the RCMP, paramedics, ambulance, hospital, emergency services, everyone to ensure that our main routes are the top priority. If snow falls one day and they're cleared and it snows again the next, they will remain the priority. And unfortunately, that means that cul-de-sacs and back roads, streets where you reside on may not, in fact, be plowed in a timely way. And certainly the city is sorry for that and regrets the inconvenience that was caused to many people. But at the end of the day, public safety is paramount in terms of ensuring the ability of fire trucks and ambulances and the RCMP to get as close as they can to wherever they have to deliver the very necessary services they provide. So to those of you in the city who have been very patient, thank you very much. As you well know, as I've just mentioned earlier, it had an impact on garbage collection as well, and couldn't have come at a tougher time of year. Certainly staff every year look at changes that can be made or improvements to ensure better delivery of those services if we're impacted again by a significant snowfall, and hopefully that will result in some improvement for next year. But in the meantime, as I say, I want to thank citizens for their patience and staff for their very hard work. And that is it for my report. Ms. Gurry, I don't think we're in a position to rise and report on anything tonight.
That's correct, Your Worship.
We do have some presentations, though. I'm delighted to introduce a poetry reading. It's pre-recorded poetry from our poet laureate, our new poet laureate, Kamal Parmar. And I will look to the people with technical ability to deliver that. Please.
Good afternoon, Your Worship Mayor Krog and respected councillors. It is an honor and a privilege for me to read a poem of mine as a humble tribute to the wonderful city of Nanaimo as we usher in a new year, 2022. Before I read, I would like to begin by acknowledging that Nanaimo is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the traditional territory of the Sumenemu First Nation. The title of my poem is Flying High. In the wee hours of dawn, the morning star burns in the vault of the night that lingers, not letting go. Even when the air is bowing out, the landscape slumbers, the raw air slicing across the sky, swirls across pines and conifers, pockmarked by clods of snow that cling like nails to a magnet. Outside my bay window, faint blue sky peeps above serrated contours of pines, rising above rows upon rows of houses, snow-speckled and half-buried. Faint skeins of darkness linger on the serrated edges of the maple leaves. All is cloaked in silence. Quiet as a mole, daylight steals across the sky. A new day is born, lifting the veil of morning mist. It is a new year. The golden orb of the sun ascends gently, squinting through the wild blueberry bushes, making accordions of light through the canopy of arbutus leaves. And Nanaimo is bathed in sunlight, a light so sacred, a light full of new hopes, of dreams soon to become a reality. Its lakes a glistening mirror as geese skim low and fly up, their bodies silhouetted in gold, twirling to the chorus of chickadees and siskins. Let us rejoice. Let us fly high and stand strong. Why do we crawl when we are meant to scale mountain peaks? Thank you very much.
Ms. Parmar, I hope you were watching tonight and were able to see and hear yourself read. And I appreciate you taking on this task as the Poet Laureate for Nanaimo. That's much appreciated. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Regional District of Nanaimo Freshwater Perspectives 2021 Public Benchmark Survey results. And we have Julie Pisani from the Regional District, I hope. Ms. Pisani, welcome. Always a pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you very much. I will be relying on the IT crew there at the City of Nanaimo to share my slides, please.
And it's working so far. This is good.
Okay, excellent. So thank you very much for having me today to present the results from our regional public benchmark survey on freshwater perspectives. My name is Julie Pisani, and I am the program coordinator for the Regional District of Nanaimo's Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program, which is a regional service that's offered to all 4 member municipalities, as well as all 7 electoral areas across the region, focusing on water education, science, and planning. So I'm here today because the RDN board did receive the full Freshwater Perspectives survey results back in October 2021 and directed me to proceed with individual presentations to municipal councils across the region to present the results pertaining to each municipality. So next slide, please. So a bit on the background and objectives of this public survey. The main objective of this research was to gain a better understanding of community perspectives, behaviors, and priorities concerning freshwater resources in the region. In particular, we're measuring the importance of local freshwater issues to residents, gathering a better understanding of the reasons that residents conserve water, determining water conservation and preservation habits, behaviors, and actions, seeking to identify barriers to outdoor water conservation, measuring awareness of unique practices pertaining to water protection, such as rain gardens, measuring awareness and involvement in our regional drinking water and watershed protection program, measuring awareness of drinking water sources and watersheds, as well as obtaining suggestions for things the RDN can do to preserve and protect the local freshwater supply beyond what is already being done. Next slide. So the methodology of the survey was mixed methods using both telephone and online methods. The survey was conducted last year in the month of July, so between June 28th and August 2nd, by professional market research firm Ipsos. Random digit dialing by area was the primary method used targeting municipal residents. And a randomized mail out with a survey URL, so a web link within a postcard that was mailed out, was the focused approach for electoral area residents, with about 10,000 sent out. Residents who received a phone call could opt to complete the survey online instead. And ultimately, a total of 800 surveys were completed by phone and 593 were completed online. The aim of the survey was to really strike a balance across age, gender, location, and regional demographics. Next slide. So this next slide just simply illustrates the demographics, so the weighted sample characteristics that were obtained through the survey. You'll see that basically what this is trying to do is represent the regional demographics as closely as it can to the census data that's most current to 2016. So you'll see for Nanaimo, that was weighted at 59% of the community population. Home ownership at around 72% in terms of the respondents were homeowners. And residents who participated that were over 55 in age represented 52% of the survey respondents, just as some examples. Next slide, please. So overall, 361 surveys were completed by City of Nanaimo residents out of the total 1,393 that were completed across the region. Now, bearing in mind the weighted sampling, this actually bumped up the number to 815 surveys from City of Nanaimo residents when the weighting was applied in order to, again, match the true demographics of our region. Next slide. So now I'll get into the results here and just some of the highlights that emerged specific to the City of Nanaimo responses. So in terms of awareness of drinking water source, a large portion of City of Nanaimo respondents actually incorrectly identified that their drinking water provider was the Regional District of Nanaimo. Almost half of respondents thought this. However, 24% of respondents correctly identified the drinking water supply as coming from the municipally operated system. 19% of respondents report that they don't know where their drinking water comes from. And this was actually the highest of all areas and municipalities within the region that took the survey. In terms of the awareness of your watershed, so this is pertaining to the watershed that residents live within. So where their house and their property resides, separate from where the drinking water source comes from. So similarly, 34% of respondents from Nanaimo incorrectly identified that they live in the Nanaimo River watershed. It's correct, that's where the drinking water comes from, but it's not necessarily where people are residing within city limits. 25% correctly identified either the Millstone River, Chase River, Departure Creek, Wally Creek, etc., as the watershed they live in within the city. But the largest portion of respondents, 38%, indicated that they did not know what watershed they lived in. In terms of awareness of the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program, 40% of Nanaimo respondents cited that they were aware of the RDN's Drinking Water Watershed Protection Program, and 36% reported that they had indeed participated in at least one activity run by the program. Next slide. So in terms of priority issues, the vast majority of Nanaimo respondents ranked all of the freshwater issues listed as important. This included water supply for future, included seasonal droughts and the concern for aquatic ecosystems, and it included actually the highest response rate, citing the importance of access to freshwater locations for recreation. Next slide. Moving on to water conservation behaviors. Surprisingly, City of Nanaimo had the lowest response rate in the region for engaging in water conservation behaviors, both indoors and outdoors. So this is folks self-identifying as participating in certain water conservation behaviors that were listed within the survey. 19% of respondents from the city answered they don't know what the main barrier is preventing them from conserving more water. And 24% state that there are none or there is nothing preventing them from conserving more water. So no barriers to preventing more conservation. In terms of water protection, so this is more around protecting water quality, City of Nanaimo had the highest response rate across the region in terms of identifying awareness of rain gardens on nearby properties and private businesses. Next slide, thanks. So coming to the end of some of the findings here, suggestions for the Regional District of Nanaimo. City of Nanaimo respondents were the most likely to cite more public education, awareness, and advertising as the one additional thing the RDN could do to preserve and protect local freshwater at 15%. However, most respondents noted that they didn't know what more the RDN could do at 31%. Next slide. So overall, in summary, the findings point us to the following. There's positive uptake of water conservation behaviors across the region, and there's some awareness and participation in existing RDN drinking water and watershed protection activities. Importantly, there's widespread care for freshwater issues. There's certainly more work needed to be done to enhance public literacy on their drinking water source and their home watersheds. And there's room to improve the uptake of certain water conservation behaviors that are already encouraged through RDN programs such as rebates. Further, there's opportunity to expand the prevalence and the knowledge of rain gardens, as well as increasing riparian planting among streamside landowners. Next slide. So next steps. This analysis will be used to help tailor the DWWP program implementation to best suit the needs of and address the gaps present in our various communities. This 2021 survey will act as a benchmark against which we'll do follow-up surveys to compare and gauge progress. The RDN anticipates conducting a total of 2 more follow-up surveys in the next 5-year increments. And last slide. That's everything. Thank you very much to everyone who participated in the survey, and thank you for having me present today. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and you can look at the final report, which is posted online at the link below. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pisani. Before the screen comes up and I can see all members of council might have questions, it ill behooves or nor is it politically wise for a mayor to be critical of their citizens during election year, but these numbers are really rather quite disturbing when 1 in 5 have no idea where their water comes from, which the last time I checked is the source of all life. So clearly we have some significant public education ahead of us, trying to acquaint everyone with what it means. And just because lots of it falls from the sky or comes down in the form of snow in the winter doesn't mean that we have an endless supply of fresh drinking water. So I really appreciate the presentation tonight. Are there any questions from council members? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. It's less of a question, more of a comment. Is Nanaimo has a very good conservation rate in our water. In fact, we're using less water now than we were using before, and our population has expanded considerably. I would look to see going forward that if we are able to educate our members of our community even more, that our conservation could be increased even that much more. Thank you.
I think those are very wise words. Ms. Pisani.
Thank you, Your Worship. And to respond to the councillor's comment, very, very good comment. And I just want to emphasize that in seeing those surprising results at City of Nanaimo with the lowest response rate of self-identifying water conservation behaviors, one way we might be able to interpret that is it is quite second nature for City of Nanaimo residents to be engaging in these behaviors and maybe not quite categorizing them as like these are specific water conservation behaviors, whereas in other communities, perhaps that is the case. So we do have to look sort of internally into the community at sort of perspectives of how people view the actions that they're taking, whether they're understanding that that is indeed conserving water by, for example, not having a green lawn, and if they're doing that actively, or if that's just sort of part of the culture here in Nanaimo. Because I do want to echo, yes, there are some strong trends in terms of water conservation in the city, and that's improving over time as the population grows. So that should be commended of residents in the city. So thanks for the comment. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, Ms. Pisani, thank you for taking the time tonight to present to Council. Very much appreciated. The next item are committee minutes. They're just to be received. No motion is required. We have no consent items, Ms. Gurry, and we have no delegations unrelated to agenda items. So the next is item 12, that's reports, and the Midtown Water Supply Project. Mr. Sims, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you tonight and just echo some of those comments that were already made about water conservation. It's startling how well Nanaimo residents have conserved water. So this evening there's an information report just attaching some significant detail, but we're really in front of you tonight to update yourselves and the community on a very important and extensive work to build further resilience in the city's water supply, especially our mid-city supply backbone. And Council is well aware that we had a very significant water main break in April of 2019. Hard to believe it's almost 3 years ago. This resulted in quite a rejigging of the capital plan, and we've picked up other opportunities to improve and increase resilience along the way. So there's a presentation that I'd ask IT staff to pull on the screen, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Squire to present one of the most significant and important underground infrastructure projects that we've seen in this community in quite a long time. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank
you very much, and welcome, and good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for having me, and thank you, Mr. Sims, for the introduction. Next slide, please. So the previous water supply strategy was water quality focused, and these goals were achieved with the construction of the South Fork Water Treatment Plant and among other capital improvement projects. Now we're really refocusing on looking at being risk adverse and building system redundancy into the critical core infrastructure of the water supply system. Next slide, please. Now, our current highest critical infrastructure and largest risk to the water system is our Midtown water supply region. This illustration that you see before you, we do not have any redundancy in this system. As you can see, we have one main water supply through the Buttertubs Marsh. It's actually underneath the Buttertubs Marsh. There's a trail system that goes directly transecting the Buttertubs Marsh. There's a large 900 millimeter diameter steel water main underneath that Buttertubs Marsh that was installed in 1976. It's a singular water main supplying the Midtown and North Nanaimo, that being our critical infrastructure. We also have other redundancy in the system on Boundary and Northfield, but it's under capacity. It's a 400 millimeter asbestos cement that was installed in the early 70s, and it's under, like I said, under capacity, and also asbestos cement. And also what Mr. Sims talked about is the Bowen Road infrastructure, which we have underneath Bowen Road. Next slide, please. Now, again, that significant failure of a primary essential service happened on April 3rd. We lost 22 million liters of water within hours. 3 of our main reservoirs, our supply reservoirs, were drained, and we're receiving phone calls from the hospital that the upper floors were out of water. After we fixed the leak and isolated that incident, we found, after we dug out the pipe, that the condition of the pipe revealed other leaks and structural failure was evident. The consequence of failure, obviously, for this future failures is extreme risk to our water supply. So over the last 2 years, we've been very diligent in planning, communicating, and coming up with routes and alignments. Next slide, please. Again, looking at our main backbone, where we have the primary supply main going underneath the butter tubs, and then we've got in red showing the existing failing Bowen Road water supply main. Next slide, please. What we have now is the ultimate, oh, sorry, back up. Thank you. So with this plan, we'll be installing a new primary water supply main extending from 5th Street College Drive intersection along the parkway. It'll cross the parkway towards the college, and then from there follow the parkway all along till it hits Northfield, and then up Northfield through the new Gateway project across Bowen and into the Labio pump station. What that does with a new primary, it provides redundancy to the existing butter tubs water supply main, so that if in an event that does fail, or we can actually look at it in future and get a condition assessment on it. And then we're also looking at a new secondary supply main from the Pride station that would connect into the existing butter tubs water supply main, and then connect into the Labio pump station. Next slide, please. And what this will do is actually provide a new dedicated water supply service to the Nanaimo General Hospital. Next slide. So with what we looked at, when we're looking at bigger projects like this, is integrating with how can we integrate with other projects, given that this project is essentially off the road and most of it is going on the east side of the parkway or on the north side of the parkway. What this does is provides opportunity exists to build a future trail system over sections of the supply main access road, which will further enhance the community's walkable network. This section there will be a section through the Bevan Park that will be built to the full standard, given it's currently a full functioning park. And other sections, such as from along the parkway from Northfield to 3rd Street, will be built with a gravel surface in the interim. That will allow our operations staff to gain access to that critical infrastructure. Next slide, please. And then in doing so, what we're doing, using the luxury of gravity, it will negate the need for the Labio pump station. Will no longer need to pump, and there will be an opportunity for potential future power generation as a result. Next slide. So the risk to this project is it's been expedited due to the current risks. We've accelerated the project right now. We're currently out for negotiated requests for proposals, trying to engage a contractor, and the budget is currently based on a 30% preliminary design. The cost for the constructions since then have increased dramatically and over the last year. As you're well aware, that there's a labor shortage currently in the market, and material costs are certainly volatile. Next slide, please. The current budget we have that was developed with that 30% design back last May is 28.4 million. We hope to be, we're currently in design or preliminary design. We have 50% design right now. And as I mentioned, right now, we're looking at negotiated requests for proposals. It's an accelerated procurement that will allow some value-added constructability review with the contractor and engineer and the owner, ourselves, the city's operational staff, working together to build a project, looking at ideas. Somewhere engineers are really good at designing, contractors are good at building. Somewhere in the middle lies a really good project. Hopefully we'll be finalize the design later this spring into the summer, and hopefully breaking ground early this summer, and for a duration of construction potentially of approximately 2 years to build this project. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free.
Thank you very much. I'll give it a second with Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and so you too, Mr. Squire. One of the presentation slides had people walking over a pipe, which I'm fine with. When the Bowen Road pipe burst, there was damage done and cars were traveling around and stuff like that. In the event that a pipe burst underground under a pedestrian walkway, what would we expect to happen, or has that ever happened before?
Well, in this chance, I like the public being on corridors for utility. If there's a leak, they're the first to see it, but this type of material in itself is not deconstructive like the material on Bowen. The pipe on Bowen is called high presscon concrete. It's basically, when it breaks, it's catastrophic. It's not like a small water leak. The pipe material we're choosing is either going to be a steel structure or high density polyethylene. If a leak develops in that type of material, it's a very small leak, and it's not as catastrophic. You'll basically see some boiling up of some water. It's not going to endanger any public by doing so.
Councillor Armstrong, Your Worship.
Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. When you stated that the initial is 28 million, do you have a rough idea what that's going to go up by?
It's very hard, and that's the reason. Yeah, of late, the material costs, like I mentioned, are just volatile. Even just ordering materials right now, we're months away by receiving any pipe. Very hard. If we get a contractor that essentially has their pulse on the industry earlier on, maybe we can negate some of those costs by adding some value-added incentives and look at it further.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, I was just reading in the paper that the truckers are going to start to refuse to travel on BC roads during the winter unless they're improved. Will that have an impact as well? Because I'm assuming most of our materials will come in from off island.
Yeah, that's something we're going to be looking at. Some of the materials we're looking at options, whether it's stainless steel pipe or carbon steel pipe. It comes from different parts of North America. High density polyethylene, for instance, most of the manufacturing is done in Houston, Texas. And last year with the hurricanes coming in, that obviously upsets that industry as well. And those prices could be affected. So those are kind of the risks that we want to look at from procurement perspective on a very early basis and negate some of that risk as early as possible.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I'm not seeing any other questions. So, Mr. Squire, Mr. Sims, thank you very much for the presentation tonight. Much appreciated. And a very important project for the public. The next is item 12B, abandoning bylaws not proceeding to adoption. Sounds ominous, Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next three reports on your agenda have been authored by Ms. Robertson, who is in attendance to answer any questions that I am unable to assist you with. The first report, Abandoning Bylaws Not Proceeding to Adoption, outlines 5 bylaws currently that have been recognized that require an official motion by council to abandon them. These are bylaws that have either need to be abandoned because the applicant has withdrawn the application, so it no longer needs to be adopted. Another example is that council may have referred or given readings to a bylaw and it has gone to the ministry for approval and has not received ministerial approval, so therefore it needs to be abandoned. And this process is just to clean up the books in order to comply with and reach our goals in the bylaw and policy renewal project that Ms. Robertson's been undertaking the last couple of years. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer, and if not, Ms. Robertson is also available to answer any questions on the 5 bylaws before you this evening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. Welcome, Ms. Robertson, and Councillor Gesselbrock has a question, and then
Thanks, Your Worship, through you to Ms. Gurry or Ms. Robertson. I just had a question around the, I think it was the bylaw around animal body traps. What was the? I wasn't able. I didn't see it anywhere explaining sort of the reasoning behind that being abandoned. Maybe I missed it, but I'm just curious.
Your Worship. Ms. Robertson, did you want to go ahead and answer that one?
Either or.
Go ahead.
Okay. When it was initially endorsed for its first readings by council, it was sent to the minister, who did not sign off on the bylaw. I'm unsure of the reasons why it was not signed off, but it was pursued by council through AVICC, who supported a resolution to lobby the ministry. However, it was not supported by UBCM under the resolution B107. So really, without the minister approval or support from UBCM to lobby the ministry, the bylaw just can't proceed at this time.
It needs additional authority to be able to enforce it?
Correct. Yes, it needs ministry approval because it's regulated by them through the Wildlife Act.
Okay. And just a follow-up question. Is this an issue here in Nanaimo?
Your Worship, I have a little bit of information on that. I remember when it initially came to council some years back, and it's not a significant issue. We do have bylaws in place. We do have environment bylaw enforcement that do look after our streams and the beaver dams, etc. It is closely monitored, and Mr. Lindsay, I'm not sure if he has any additional information, but I have not heard of it being a problem here. And this was just, I think, over and above a statement to say how the municipality is opposed to this, but I don't believe it is an issue in Nanaimo.
thank you, Ms. Gurry.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so someone care to make the recommended motion? Councillor Bonner, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. The next are options to ban conversion therapy. Again, Ms. Gurry and Ms. Robertson, I assume.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is before you just for information. Originally, the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness made a recommendation that council look into options for banning conversion therapy. After this fact, council then did refer it back to staff to look at those options. But in the interim, the federal government was actually looking into a bill for this exact purpose. And in December of 2021, so just recently, they did, the bill did receive royal assent, and it, Bill C4 makes it illegal to cause another person to undergo conversion therapy, remove a minor from Canada to subject them to conversion therapy abroad, profit from providing conversion therapy, and advertise or promote conversion therapy. And the legislation also authorizes courts to order the seizure of conversion therapy advertisements or to order their removal from computer systems or the internet. So the bill, like I said, received royal assent on Wednesday, December 9th, 2021. So in terms, in respect to this recommendation. We brought this forward for information, as with this bill, there is no, it's not necessary for council to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. It is now the law of Canada, having received royal assent. Are there any questions? If not, someone care to make the recommended motion? Moved, Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. The next is 12D, appointment of Chief Election Officer and Deputy Chief Election Officer. Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is necessary and required by legislation to bring forward to you to appoint a Chief Election Officer and Deputy Chief Election Officer for the 2022 general election. So as you are all aware, in October of 2022, there is a local government election, and it is required under the legislation for you to make these appointments. So the recommendation is that you appoint myself, Sheila Gurry, as the Chief Election Officer, and Skye Snellgrove as the Deputy Chief Election Officer. And Ms. Robertson has authored the report and provided the rationale for this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, and or Ms. Robertson is available to answer any questions you might have with respect to this report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. I doubt very much I'm going to see any questions from anyone, and I'm not so far. Who would care to make the recommended motion? Councillor Bonner moves, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is development permit application number DP 001204-24 Spyglass Lookout. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Worship. And I'll actually, Mr. Holmes joined us online, and I'll turn it over to him and ask him to introduce items E, F, G, and H on your agenda this evening.
Thank you. And I just realized it shows in the title, so to speak, is 24, but it's actually 25 Spyglass. Is that correct, I believe?
Yes, good evening, Your Worship and Council. Yes, that is correct. It's 25 Spyglass Lookout. Thank you. If you could bring up, please, the IT assistants here. If you could please bring up the context map on the overhead. Thank you very much. That identifies the subject property there. This application is from Alfredo and Armando Tura, and the request is to permit a single residential dwelling within the aquatic setback for 25 Spyglass Lookout. If you could please bring up the site survey, that's attachment D to the report. That'll give you an idea of what's proposed here. Thank you. The application was previously considered by council on December 6th of 2021, and was deferred to a future council meeting. That's why it's before you tonight. The subject property was created by subdivision of Protection Island in 1960, and this property is currently undeveloped and consists of an islet in the Nanaimo Harbor that's attached by a sandy spit to Protection Island. The property is currently primarily in its natural state. The subject property falls within development permit area for environmentally sensitive features, which is development permit area 2 under the official community plan, and a development permit is required prior to any development taking place on the site. The applicant's proposing here, as you can see, is a construction of a single-story residential dwelling, approximately 78 square meters in floor area, and that's proposed as a cabin for seasonal use. If you could please bring up attachment F, which is the biophysical map. Thank you very much. Give you an idea of the relationship between the cabin and the environmentally sensitive features on the property there. The proposed dwelling is located in a previously disturbed area that's a grassy meadow. And to ensure the proposal meets the development permit area guidelines that are applicable and does not negatively impact the environmentally sensitive features on the property, the applicant provided a qualified environmental professionals report with a number of recommendations, including securing the report as a condition of Section 219 covenant on the property to ensure the property is developed and used in a manner that protects the environmentally sensitive areas. The application also includes requests variances to the minimum required setback from the sea. 15 meters is required, 6.4 meters is proposed for the dwelling, and the proposal also includes a reduction from 15 meters to 0 meters just for the portion of the property that is identified as the servicing corridor to Protection Island. The proposal also includes a variance from required 2 parking spaces to 0 parking spaces, as obviously it would be quite difficult to get a vehicle onto the property. The proposed development addresses the Development Permit Area 2 guidelines staff had identified in the report. The conditions are recommended to ensure the property is developed in accordance with the applicable guidelines. Happy to take any questions, but that's all I had to say on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holm. Any questions at this stage for Mr. Holm? I'm not seeing any. Before I go to delegations, I just want to say a couple of things about being a delegation before council. Each person is entitled to up to 5 minutes. At 1 minute, given particularly that we are Zooming this meeting, or much of it, I'm going to say rather loudly when 4 minutes are up that there is 1 minute left, and I will expect and hope that people will be guided by that. The delegations also need to be advised, I think in fairness, that I believe some of them have spoken previously at council, and I would ask you please to consider that new and significant information be provided in that you not simply be repeating what we've heard already. And of course, I hope that I don't have to mention this during the course of the proceedings, but the rules that govern our council's procedures and set out in the bylaw say quite directly, if a delegation A speaks disrespectfully to or of any person, B refuses to abide by the rules for delegation, C fails to adhere to the time limits, or D disregards the authority of the chair to run the meeting, the chair may do any of the following. I can ask you to withdraw the offensive remarks, or cease, stop the presentation, or take steps to have the delegation abide by the chair's instruction, and that would include ultimately me expelling. Now, I'm certainly hopeful that's not going to be necessary tonight, but I do hope this matter will be conducted with the emphasis on what is legally appropriate here tonight. So, the first delegation, and again reminding you, you will have 5 minutes, is Mark Kelly. And Mr. Kelly, if you could introduce yourself, give us your address, and at 1 minute I will indicate loudly to you have a minute left when you've done 4. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark Kelly. I live at 169 Covalton Trail on Protection Island. And I was at the last meeting, and I just want to thank you all for letting us be here and again participate in this process. I think it's great. And I'm not going to talk about anything new, but I wanted, the last meeting, it was really, some things struck me during it. And one was just how passionately, particularly Mayor, that you defended your staff. And I got to thinking about your staff and, you know, their part that they play in this, this development. And I'm in support of this development. And I'm in support of your staff. I think your staff, you hire them for their education, you hire them for their expertise, you hire them for their abilities, and in my experience working with them, I think they do a great job. I think they're probably the most educated people on the planet on this particular development. They're the people who actually read the reports from the engineers, they read the reports from the folks, and they weigh out against the bylaws that we have, whether it's appropriate or not, and they make a recommendation. And they have a recommendation to approve the development and approve the variances that have been requested. And I think your staff should be supported. I've been wondering to myself, like, what, on something like a simple development, how, you know, how one could decide not to support a staff's recommendation, the folks who actually are experts in the matter, are the planning folks, are the people who make these decisions and do that. And I'm here to say I really would hope you support your staff. That's my main message. And I also think about, this is a waterfront development, it's a foreshore development. There's some issues that come into play, but I also would like you to think about your own foreshore development. The city of Nanaimo is developing the foreshore on this side of things. You got plans for a magnificent waterfront walkway. And in terms of impact to the foreshore, it is exponentially more impactful than this particular development. And I wanted you to, and I think about how the city is going to go through and do this development. And I'm a big supporter of this. We're a port city, we're a harbor city. We should have a great place to walk on the foreshore. And the city is going to hire engineers to come up with a plan. You're going to ask your staff to work with these engineers, work with biologists to make sure that it's developed in a environmentally responsible way. And you're going to look to your staff to give you guidance on how to do that appropriately. And I think your staff is, from what I know and the experience I've had, is going to do a really good job of collating all of that, putting it together, and letting you guys know what the real deal is and how you should proceed on your own foreshore development. And I think they should be trusted. And I think they're going to go through the same process with your foreshore development as this one. And in terms of impact to what's happening in this, our bay or in our port, you can't even measure how much impact comparatively this one little spot is going to have compared to the city's one. And again, I'm a big fan of your staff. I've worked with them a little bit. I find them responsive, I find them smart, I find them knowledgeable, and I think that they have a really good recommendation. And I'd like you to listen to them. I'd like you to support them. I think they know what they're talking about. That's what I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions from anybody. Councillor Thorpe. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's a question to you. Perhaps I just missed it, but I didn't get the delegate's address.
Oh, it's 169 Covalton Trail on Protection Island.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. The next delegation is Greg Herringer. Mr. Herringer, name, address, 5 minutes, minute warning.
Presentation that should be pulled up on screen here.
Thank you very much.
Is this just forward?
So again, if you can introduce yourself and address, please.
Yeah.
Thanks.
My name is Greg Herringer. I live at 6321 View Street, Port Alberni, on the unceded territory of the Hoopa-Chesset and Taschat First Nations. I'm speaking here on behalf and support of the development at 25 Spyglass Lookout. It's not doing anything. There we go. There are two issues I would like to address here tonight, neither of which I spoke to at the last meeting here. The first one is the site location, the elevation, and the impact of sea level rising on the development proposal. And I also would like to address concerns that were expressed about the elevated access and sewage construction from the protection island to the smaller island. In a report in 2019 to the RDN, they pointed out that they're expecting a minimum of 0.8 meters rise in sea levels by the year 2100. That's a conservative estimate, could well be 1.2 meters, neither of which will have a significant impact on the development on Tura Island. I call it Tura Island for lack of a better name there. The cabin's going to be just situated at the highest point, which is above the 3-meter contour level, which will raise it well above any projected rise in the next near future. Beyond, Alfredo's grandchildren might have to address it, but so will everyone else on Protection Island. It's going to be integrated into the natural landscape with supplemental planting, so it's going to blend well into the island without impacting the existing sensitive ecosystem areas. And as I said, the cabin footprint will be located above the 3-meter contour line of elevation. And this is critical when you look at other properties on Protection Island. There are actually 24 other properties built at the similar or lower elevation on Protection Island, which was, wasn't pointed out at the last meeting. They primarily focused on the location on Tura Island of the development, neglecting to mention there were 24 other properties that would be impacted by the projected rise in sea level. 167 Colvilton Trail, 2 to 3 meters elevation, lower than Tura Island. 171 Colvilton Trail, 3 meters, same as Tura Island. You get to these properties on Colvilton Trail. The first one on the right, 3 meters elevation. The green roof one, 3 meters elevation. The blue roof one is at the 2 meter elevation contour, well below what's proposed for Mr. Tura's development. The larger one at the far left is at 3 meters elevation. All properties at or below what's proposed for Tura Island. So these are just a few of the properties around the island that are going to be impacted by the rise in sea levels. These ones in particular are more susceptible because they're on the Georgia Strait side and subject to the wind and wave action and any storm surges. The elevated access and sewage concerns, I feel, is a bit of a red herring. They're proposing to build an elevated one similar to the dock structures that exist already that have proven to be not impacted or damaged with storm surge or any other issues. It's going to be connected to the municipal sewage system, which is on Protection Island. There should be no issue with that. They're going to comply with all bylaws and recommendations by the city. By having the walkway, elevated walkway, adjacent to, away from the sensitive system on the Sandy Spit, it protects that ecosystem there. It's going to be about 70 meters in length, which is about half the length of the docks to the south. And local residents were concerned about sewage spills due to storm damage. Again, I propose that this is a red herring with storm damage. If you look at where Protection, the Tura Island is located, the elevated walkway is indicated by the red line and the green line. Is
1 minute.
From there. They've all been, this proposal endorsed by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. The Port of Nanaimo Harbor Authority has approved this, and the registered consulting biologist has also approved all this. And the planned development calls for them to adhere to all regulations for sewage disposal as set out by the City of Nanaimo. Here we have an overview of it. You can see the island in the center there with the little lagoon and the spit there. It's protected from both the northwest and southeast winds. Your northwest winds are coming, they're blocked by the bulk of Protection Island to the northwest. The Dinghy Dock Pub is far more exposed, and it's a similar sewage system setup. It's pumped ashore to go into the Protection Island system. Southeast winds, again, protected completely by the island itself.
And
so there should be.
If you can wrap up, please. Your 5 is done.
Oh, okay. I'm past. Okay, these are just showing the effects of wind lessening as they enter the harbor here, and just the progression of how little damage was occurred to the Tombola and the docks over the last 10 years. There's no wind throw, no storm throw wind driftwood up there. So the structure we constructed, as any other dock would be, to withstand any storm damage, and this has minimal effect from storm damage there.
Thank you very much. I'll wait for the screen to come back up to see if there's any questions for the delegation from council members. I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Herringer.
Thank you.
The next is a Zoom delegation, Jürgen Gehring. Mr. Gehring, good evening.
Good evening.
If you could do, as I'm sure you've heard me say, but I'll say it again, if you can state your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes, and at 1 minute I'll announce relatively loudly you have a minute left if you've done your 4 already, okay? So please commence.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Jürgen Gehring. I live at 232 McCleary Street in the Old City Quarter. I have a recreational property on Protection Island that I've had there for many years. I've seen lots of development happen over the decades. And I'm speaking today because I'm very concerned about this proposal and I'm speaking against it. A few weeks ago at a high tide, I took my little boat. I commute by rowboat when I go to the island. It's very romantic. I took my rowboat around the island there, and it was about a 15-foot tide. The Tombola was submerged to a level about 1.5 feet. So the Tombola is roughly at about a 13.5-foot tide level. And the site survey on the proposal shows this property as one crescent-shaped island, and indeed that's what it appears to be at about a 14.5-foot tide or 15-foot tide. In December, both in December and January, we had tides that were 15 feet and higher on more than 12 occasions in each of the months. And in fact, in each of the months, there were 8 tides higher than 16 feet. The property is actually 3 islands, and much smaller in size than represented in all the documents. I didn't used to think that sea level rise was something that would concern me in my lifetime. New research suggests that Greenland's glaciers, however, are melting at a rate that is 6 times higher than in the 1990s. This is from a NASA report. And Greenland's glaciers are, at this point, the largest contributor to sea level rise. And I don't know how many of you have heard about the Doomsday Glacier in Antarctica. It's the Thwaites Glacier. It's the size of Florida. And new research from last month have shown from scientists, it published in science journals, have scientists say that this glacier could collapse into the ocean between 3 and 5 years, raising the sea levels worldwide by 65 centimeters, over 2 feet. This was published in science journals last month and recently picked up by mainstream media such as The Guardian. So the question is, in these times, should we really consider bending the rules, twisting the rules, pretzeling the rules to allow people to build closer to the water? I think not. Whenever someone builds on hazardous lands, they expect compensation when disasters happen. One strategy for sea level rise is to retreat from the flooding areas. This is expensive and often requires governments to buy out landowners. For example, this may occur in areas recently flooded in BC. Will Nanaimo buy out the property when sea levels rise? If they knowingly permit development in vulnerable areas, they should the city should certainly consider its liability for future compensation. The proponent at the time of purchasing this land understood full well what he was getting into. The lot was heavily discounted in price due to its unlikelihood of being ever developed. There was even a warning about the limitation of use that was in the real estate listing. The selling realtor knew, the purchasing realtor knew, and the seller knew from his own experience, because his proposal had been turned down, that this was a very, very difficult and uphill issue with this property.
1 minute, Mr. Gehring.
Okay. 1 minute. The parking variance from 2 to 0 lots is very problematic. The report states that the parking should take place on Spyglass Lookout. Well, in all of Nanaimo, we have a 24-hour parking bylaw. On day 2 of the vehicle being parked there, upland owners will call bylaw. They will have to come over, ticket it, and tow it, barge it, whatever. So that's a real sticky issue. There are a lot of lots of loose ends with this proposal, and this proposal goes against the objectives of the commission of the official community plan. It has zero community buy-in. There are 148 people signed a letter against this proposal, and it has also 0 approval from DFO. We searched that out.
Can you wrap up, please? Your 5 minutes are up.
There are just too many loose ends in this proposal, and I sincerely ask City Hall to reject it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much. The next is James McQuarrie via Zoom. Mr. McQuarrie, do you have you with us?
Working on it. There we go. I'm not sure if you see a picture. Let's see. There we go. I think I should be there now.
Yes, good. And again, if you've heard me already, but I'll say it again for the record, 5 minutes. When you're finished 4 minutes, I will announce 1 minute. You'll have a minute to finish, please. Introduce yourself and your address. Thank you.
My name is Jim McQuarrie. I live at 22 Spyglass Lookout on Protection Island. I want to thank you for yet another opportunity to speak to this issue, but I wish it wasn't necessary. I wish the council 17 years ago that voted against similar variances had taken the obvious next steps to acquire, properly zone, and protect a vulnerable and environmentally valuable part of our harbor. To my mind, it's a simple but profound decision. The extreme variances requested would require you to abandon long-standing and hard-fought environmental principles that bring credit to our city so that Dr. Tura can build a holiday cabin. Now, you cannot fault Dr. Tura for his tenacity and attention to detail, but the very best plan in the very worst place is still a mistake. Dr. Tura brought the property for a fraction of what this much waterfront would normally cost. He knew its history, and it was a gamble. He counted on his considerable powers of persuasion and remarkable persistence to get council to let him win his bet. He probably did not count on climate change getting in the way, because as extreme as the waterfront variances he's asking for are, and they are overlapping and required for virtually every aspect of this proposal, the reality is that every year the water will creep closer to Dr. Tura's proposed developments and increase the risks they bring. Now, this is not about the future, as you can see in that picture. This image was taken 10 days ago, and this is what is left of Dr. Tura's property. That same day, the dog park in Protection Island turned into a lake. Up the coast, Parksville and Qualicum were damaged by floods. Climate change is happening now, and this property is among the most vulnerable in our city when it comes to the ravages of rising sea levels. You all know that because your reports document. Could I have the next slide, please? This is what Dr. Tura's proposal says the natural boundary of the land in question looks like now, at median tide. At high tides, as you just saw in that photograph, far more is underwater. Next slide, please. Here's what sea level rise will do by mid-century according to city projections. Again, this does not reflect the highest tides, just the median ones. Next slide, please. And that little green space is what it could look like by the end of the century. Add in the compounding risks of erosion and more extreme weather, which city documents also warn about, and the developments being planned seem foolhardy. Dr. Tura would have you believe his stewardship is needed to protect this ecosystem, that hordes of people are just itching to get down there with their firewood and their destructive waste. But that's not going to happen because it never has happened. My partner has lived at the adjacent property for 17 years. She's never seen a beach fire down there. What we have seen in recent years is evidence of severe environmental stress. Certainly, climate change is largely the reason. Extreme heat and drought, followed by torrential rains last year alone. The lesson has to be that any occupation of this property, however sporadic, is a threat. You cannot punch holes in a salt marsh for a bridge and run a concrete path for utilities through a Gary Oak meadow without dramatically increasing that threat. Much has been made of the idea this property is too small to be a park. But the ecosystem it represents does not stop at the waterline. The seals that chase fish to the shallows are part of its ecosystem. The ducks and geese that feed here and nest here are part of its ecosystem. So a protection plan that includes the marine environment could ensure that an area altered by climate change can still be a vibrant ecosystem and a credit to our city and its environmental principles. This decision is fundamentally just that, a question of principles. Does this council stand behind its own environmental rules, its own published research, the years of effort to pass forward-thinking legislation aimed at protecting our marine environment and limiting the impact of climate change?
Mr. McQuarrie.
Thank you. The answer has to be yes. So the answer to this request for unprecedented environmental variances that would violate those principles has to be no. And one further thing, I'm not sure you'll be doing Dr. Tura any favors by giving him the green light to sink even more money into a property that is itself sinking? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the screen. I don't see any questions from members of council. Thank you, Mr. McCrory. I appreciate it. The next delegation is John Sinclair, and that's a Zoom presentation as well.
Okay. I'm Mrs. John Sinclair. Heather Sinclair, Mayor and Councillors, I'm on 153 Covalton Trail, which actually were the only property that adjoins the little part of Dr. Tura's section. Okay, I want to talk about reasonableness. Why reasonableness? Because it should be the underpinning of all council's decisions. Is it reasonable in the face of the photographic evidence of what remains of the subject lot during a king tide, with accompanying storm surge, to set aside the applicable building bylaws in order to allow residents to be built on the site? Is it reasonable that the proponent have conducted due diligence regarding to the applicable building bylaws in advance of purchasing the property? Is it reasonable to presume that the proponent purchased the property understanding that building bylaw issues would make construction of a building problematic, and that he proceeded well knowing the risk he was undertaking? Does he have a claim against the realtors, perhaps? Is it reasonable to assume that given the shortcomings of the property, the proponent was able to purchase the property at a reduced price compared to Protection Island waterfront lots? Is it reasonable to expect that the city's decision will be free from future external review? Here I am thinking specifically of a subsequent owner who very possibly will suffer significant damage due to any number of causes, including logs, climatic changes, and storms in general. Is it reasonable to expect that the building or utilities infrastructure are at greater risk with this development than with the norm? There is certainly case law that can support such claims. I have sent legal articles in this regard for your review. The city's downside risk is liability for damages and significant legal costs. It all comes down to this. On the one hand, we have a proponent who knew or ought to have known that the likelihood of being permitted to construct a residence on the subject property was slim. It is certainly likely that the purchase price reflected that. On the other hand, we have existing bylaws that have been purpose developed and were in force at the time the proponent chose to purchase the land. On the other hand, we have accepted scientific fact regarding the sea rise, and that in this case, the particular property will be particularly devastating. A real prospect that the city's course of action will be the subject of legal dispute in the future. The fact that the city has no obligation to approve the application. I have not ventured into the realm of environmental considerations if they have been well covered elsewhere. Clearly, they stack up against the applicant's position. Given all the circumstances, I pose this question. Would the average Nanaimo resident consider it reasonable to grant the variances sought? I respectfully submit that the answer would surely be no. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my thoughts and entrust the result to the reasonable exercise of your discretion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sinclair. Are there any questions from council members? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much. The next is another Zoom presentation. That's Green Brolowitz.
How do I start here? Okay. I don't see myself. Can you turn yourself?
Can we mute her for a second and then I can speak to her? There's some feedback we're receiving there. Could you please, could you make sure your TV is turned off, and or if you are watching this somewhere else, please turn that off as well?
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you could, the usual, please state your name and address. You'll have 5 minutes. At the 4th minute, I will let you know you have a minute left. Thank you very much. Please commence.
Okay. Good evening, Your Worship and Councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Corinne Brolevich, and I live at 159 Covalton Trail. I'm representing a large group of Protection Islanders with 148 people who are opposed to this development and instead would like you to investigate the means to acquire this property as a public park. We are more than willing to contribute to this cause. Options: the owner could donate the property to the Nature Conservancy or the Land Trust for a significant tax deduction, or the city could purchase the property as a park and accept financial help from Protection Island contributors. Slide 1 here is, well, this is a fire department records. Alfredo Tura said he was discouraging beach fires on this property, which were common, he said. Long-term locals, as well as the volunteer fire department, have said there has not been any incidents of fire on the property. This is a letter from the Legislative Services requesting records from the fire department of any fire incidents at 25 Spyglass Lookout for the past 50 years. The fire department conducted a search of their files and did not find any records of any fire incidents on this property. Next slide, please. And then the next slide, please. It doesn't make you a good steward of the land to try and do what nature has not already done. The tree that exists in the distance there, here is a chance encounter with bird and animal feces and a seed that happened to take root and find a crack on the edge of the rock to root down to a water source. To plant a few trees on a rocky outcrop in a raised bed is a farmer's idea of growing crops. These trees will never make it to maturity. There is nowhere for the roots to grow. This piece of property has been here longer than us, and it manages the amount of trees it can provide for. That is why it's called an ecosystem, where diversified nature works in symphony together. What makes a good steward of the land is to take care of what nature has already provided and not cause any destruction to the ecosystem. Next slide here. Oh, that's it there. These trees planted are not native to this ecosystem. In the OCP DPA2 within an ESA, trees and vegetation must not be cut, altered, removed, or damaged in any way. Gravel, sand, soils, and peat must not be removed, and soil and other fill must not be deposited. Vegetation that's not native to the coastal Douglas fir climatic zone must not be planted, and development activities should avoid impacts to the protected root zones of trees. Next, here, this slide here, you see the same area in the previous slide here is exactly the same area below here. This proposed site for the building cabin is in front of these mature Gary oaks here. This picture was taken by the QEP in 2018 for his first environmental report. This same area is where there's a carpeted patio installed by Alfredo Tura after the 2019 council meeting denied his proposal. Next slide, please. This one below here, I don't know if you can see it, but it's, yeah, okay. So here's the exact same area, but you see the carpets removed. After 2.5 years, the carpets were removed over to the other side of the tourist property on the Protection Island side. In the current staff report, the QEP mentioned a previously disturbed area and grassy meadow occupying the southern portion of the lot where the dwelling is proposed. There's no mention that the owners created the disturbed area in the report. The only mention of the carpets, tents, tarps, and planter pots is in the permit terms and conditions, where it says, these items are to be removed from site prior to building permit issuance. Why have these items been allowed to be here in contravention with the environmental bylaws? A building permit is a long time away from a development permit. Next slide, please. A little bit higher up. Yeah, we can't really see it. I can't see it anyway. It's the next slide.
1 minute.
Okay, the proposed building site is on the southwest side of the mature Gary Oaks, where they will be shaded from the sun and deprived of nutrients, as nothing will grow under the building, which is fenced with lattice. The footprint of the building is not just an area composed of concrete pillars. This area of 78 square meters is completely covered and contains a septic and pump tank. The next images, please. This is the original pristine condition. Next slide, please. This is, again, the same picture, and then next slide, please. This is after the tourists purchased this property. You can see the carpeted meadow, tent, and houseboat, all in contravention of the bylaws. Next slide, please. There's a houseboat here. There's no lease with the Port Authority. What's it doing there in the mudflats? Next slide, please. Okay, this is, and a next slide, please. Let's look at the one that's zoomed in.
Could you wrap up, please?
Yep.
Your 5 minutes.
I want to know how the QEP failed to notice these contraventions of the bylaws and endangered the ecosystem for the past 2 years. How is this being a good steward of the land? I spoke with Mike Davidson on Friday, and he said they have not given any consent to the foreshore lease or a proposed bridge, for no queries have been made or received by the DFO. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from council members? I'm not seeing any. The next presentation is in person. Alfredo Tura.
Please ask questions.
Dr. Tura, you heard this over and over again, 5 minutes. At the end of 4 minutes, I'll tell you have a minute left if you're still speaking, please. Your name and address, thank you.
Thank you very much. And my name is Alfredo Tura, living in Comox and 156 Beach Drive. Thank you so much for having me here again. I will try to be as quick as I can. I'm just waiting for the, perfect. Ready? It's good? Okay. So as a, as a quick review, our previous 3 applications over the past 3 years changed and evolved, resulting in creative, innovative solutions, and they may be applicable to this parcel and possibly to other similar parcels. We'll see, I'll skip some of those because I don't want to be too late. As I demonstrated in the past, the total surface of the piling that will physically contact the ground equals only to 2 square meters, the surface of a dinner table. The actual cabin would be 6 feet off the ground with actually native grasses thriving underneath it. Again, the cost to prepare this application was close to $50,000, and the report had been unanimous. The project is technically viable. No significant detrimental effect to the ecosystem is expected. This was supported by a senior biologist and by a legal team who will develop a covenant if we are allowed to do that. I'd like to do a brief summary of previous delegation with relevant information. Mr. Mark Kelly, Protection Island resident, emphasized that the professional team clearly supported this project. Brian Senini's legal team supported the residential zoning of the lot. The water and sewage connection already provided to the property by the very city of Nanaimo and included in my taxes are all in keeping with residential zoning. Chris Zamora, senior biologist, completed several supportive environmental assessments as requested by the city. And Dr. Armando Tura spoke about sustainability and environmental benefits of a green roof, log cabin, and a walkway. Dr. Teresa van der Goes' delegation was initially misinterpreted. She spoke in support of a best solution aligned actually with the city OCP. Jim Harris, also Protection Island resident and known horticulturalist, spoke about the healthy habitat that followed my presence on the property. Greg Heringer, who you just met, BC Forest Technologies supported the project with multiple arguments. David Gross underlined the importance of the covenant. And finally, Ken Crystal, forester, spoke about the benefits of the walkway in protecting the local ecosystem. I'd like to make some corrections. When I purchased the property, I was informed by city staff that I could develop with proper planning and solutions. Second, the Port of Nanaimo and Department of Fisheries support the walkway project. And third, obviously, there will be a septic system according to the requirement of the city of Nanaimo. Additional safeguard will be adopted to flush the conduit across the walkway into the Protection Island sewer system on a regular basis and prior to my absence. Some important facts I like to underline. I report those pictures again. The houseboat and several garden items in the photo evidence provided in December and again today were already removed months ago when I was requested to do that. Also, several of the pictures provided also today were taken by accessing my property without permission. I must note that 3 of the delegations who have been consistently against this project for the past 3 years are from adjacent neighbors who use my property for beach access because they don't have it, and as a public park for years. I have pictures of trespassing that I can provide. One could wonder about true intentions and credibility.
1 minute.
In any case, these 2 pictures presented by opposing delegation were taken at super high tides that are extremely rare. This extreme situation represents only flooding events, not actual land loss. I repeat it, only flooding events that are present in other gardens on the coast of Protection Island, which become also flooded. Those pictures are deceiving, and I will show you a regular high tide and a typical high tide that present a large island with significant landmass, a isthmus that is only partially inundated and still walkable, and the 3 islets that are constantly demonstrated by other delegation are actually obviously connected and covered by non-marine vegetation. We strongly feel that this new project respects the ecosystem, the city requirement, the legal zoning, the concern addressed by opposing delegation, and our dream to build a small cabin and enjoy our property.
Thank you very much. 5 minutes on the nose. Are there any questions from council members? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much. The last delegation is Christina Nickel via Zoom.
Your Worship, she is not on Zoom, so unless she is in person, she was supposed to attend via Zoom, and she has not. Oh, I'm just seeing, I do see a Corrine there. Oh, no, Christina. Yes, so no, there is no Christina Nickel, Your Worship, on Zoom.
Out of courtesy, having regard to this meeting being conducted via Zoom, I'm going to give her a minute. All right. I'm not seeing or hearing anyone else with respect to the delegations. Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, just a question for staff, if I may. We've heard from delegations that DFO has given permission, then we've heard from delegations that DFO hasn't. Do we have an answer on that?
I can, through your worship, if that's okay with you, I can speak to Councillor Armstrong's question. To my knowledge, it would be Nanaimo Port Authority would be reviewing any application to extend the walkway or services over the harbor. To my knowledge, an application has formally has not been received. and indications in our conversations with Port Authority staff are that they would await the outcome of the development permit application before undertaking formal approvals.
So then that means there is no DFO approval at this time, correct?
My understanding, and it's that the Nanaimo Port Authority would take the application. My understanding is that at our most recent conversation with the Nanaimo Port Authority is that they had not received an application or granted approval. They're waiting on the outcome of the development permit application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move that council deny the development permit application number DP 1204 for single residential dwelling at 25 Spyglass Lookout.
Seconded by Councillor Brown. Discussion?
Thank you, Your Worship. This development, it's in contravention of our zoning bylaw for watercourse protection. Allowing the requested variances would be an extreme misalignment to our city's espoused values of environmental protection and public safety. In this day and age, we do not allow buildings to be constructed right on the shoreline with an environmentally sensitive area, especially in an era of mounting impacts from climate change and extreme weather. The photos taken whenever there's a king tide don't lie about the fact that this islet pretty much disappears underwater regularly. Allowing this residential development to occur would be gravely irresponsible, and I think if not bordering on ridiculousness. So I am not in support of it, and thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Brown, and then Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate both the applicant and those that came out in support, the delegations, and also those that come out against. But at this time, I'm not prepared to support this request. I think in totality, if you consider the lot, which was not created by, which was allowed into existence by the provincial approving officer some time ago, prior to it ever being in the city of Nanaimo, it shouldn't have been created then, and it definitely wouldn't be created now. As Councillor Gesselbrock highlighted there, we have regulations to not permit development on lots that are far larger and far, in my opinion, far more conducive to do development. So it makes no sense, I think, in the day of what we're witnessing with different weather events, the results of changing climate patterns and how that is impacting right now property, especially those on the shore and through other natural events. It just does not make sense to permit this development on this. Don't want to adopt the name that was used, but on the lot that we're talking about today. So I think there's a certain hubris associated with this, that this is in theory something that could be allowed to be developed. I think it's completely in denial of the reality, by any reasonable reality, about the conditions that we are facing and why a lot like this should be developed. Doesn't make any sense. And I think we're seeing that reflected increasingly in our policy documents. We're reviewing development permits, guidelines, and through the Reimagine Nanaimo. And so approving this I think would be completely contrary to the policy direction that has been set and that will only continue to be set as we move into the future. So the proposal as presented to me does not warrant the variance request to allow it to be built. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons and then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to share my respect for all the time, energy, and resources that have gone into getting this application before us tonight. Ultimately, I support the motion of Councillor Gesselbrock to deny the application because ultimately I do not find, I find the variances too great, particularly when we weigh those variances against the value and the goal of environmental leadership that this council has established for itself. So I'll keep it there. I'll keep it brief. I support Councillor Geselbrock's motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and through you. I don't always agree with Councillor Geselbrock and Councillor Brown, and sometimes even not with Councillor Hemmons. But on this issue, I do, and I see things the same way. I do want to acknowledge all of the delegations and the work of staff, and also Dr. Tura's team for the effort that they've put in. And I want to acknowledge that the property that we're talking about is zoned for residential. He has the legal right to build a residence on his property, but that right is contingent on the important condition that variances are granted. And to me, that's what this case comes down to. Variances here that involve setbacks in an environmentally sensitive area. And I know back on December 6th, one of the delegations at that time referenced council's record on variances and setbacks. And I have supported some, and some I have not supported. I think you have to look at each case individually and assess them on their merits or drawbacks. I also usually support staff and always respect them, but in this case, I just cannot support the setback variances that are being requested. I personally don't think this property should ever have been zoned for development, and so I just can't support approving a development. So I will be in support of Councillor Geselbrock's motion that's on the floor. And I also would note that although we have had some delegations in support of this proposal, we have received a petition with close to 150 Protection Island residents' names on it that do not support it. And if in any other area of the city, a variance was requested for a project and we had that many people in the neighborhood opposed to it, I think we would have to look very, very closely at it. So again, I take that into account as I weigh the pros and cons of this. I've given it a lot of thought, but I cannot support development here, and so I will be in support instead of Councillor Geselbrock's motion on the floor. Thank you.
Councillor Turley. You have to.
Yeah, there we are. I think Councillor Martman was ahead of me, but that's okay. She can go if she wants.
I think she's deferring to you.
Okay, fine. So I'd just like to say that, first of all, I appreciate all the input from everybody. Two things that I think are not being recognized. And first of all, is the number of buildings within the Nanaimo Harbor that are built on pilings. And I can think of about 4 off the top of my head. So we already have them built up, and I believe this particular structure is on pilings 6 feet above the ground level. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration when we're worrying about king tides, et cetera. The other thing I have a little bit of trouble with, and no disrespect to the proponent who presented it, but the pictures of the king tide appear to be taken from the northeast side of the island, which of course totally is, the meadow is totally screened by Gary oak trees on the northeast side of the island. So there's no indication there as to whether the meadow where the house is proposed, the cabin is proposed to be built, is actually flooded. And I find that a bit disrespectful. And I hope that at some point in time, they'd learn from that in the future. If you're going to assume something, make sure you got data to back it up. Thank you.
And Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I'll just concur with most of the previous councillors' remarks as to our climate change and our ecosystems, and being aware of variances when it comes to riparian zones and watercourse setbacks, etc. But I just also wanted to mention the awareness that the purchaser must have had of the challenges that could be anticipated on this piece of property. In all due respect for all the work that went into it to make it as fittable as possible, I just can't, in all fairness, see any type of building on this property. So I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to support the motion as well. Speaking to this particular application, this is a much better proposal than the last one we had. And I think staff and the proponent have done a very good job on this. I just still, my original opinion on this, on the last proposal is that there's just too many variances in this particular proposal. I think there's probably some other options out there that could be done that would allow some sort of building to take place on this property. And I do have a question for staff, if I may. And I don't think that's going to change anybody's minds, but I'm wondering, you hear a lot about rising sea levels and that sort of thing. If a person chooses to build on a property when they know that the sea level is rising, is that our responsibility to say, no, you can't do that? I'm just curious, like, are we responsible for this in terms of that?
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, maybe I'll start, and then Mr. Holm, I think he was ready to jump in there, so he might have a better answer. But I would say, first of all, there's a number of hazards or risks that could exist with any property in the city, and that could be anything from geotechnical risks related to coal mining, it comes to mind frequently in Nanaimo. Sea level rise is certainly a new one and evolving, but at the building permit stage, what will happen is there'll be a report by a professional engineer that will be done that will assess the risks and make recommendations, and then that report will get registered on title, and along with that report, it gives protection or liability protection to the community and the issuance of that building permit. So that's the way that the legislation anticipates that it's addressed in these situations, and that's currently been the longstanding practice here in Nanaimo.
So I guess the other question is, what protects the city in the event that this were to go forward and the place does get flooded out in 20 years from now? What is there to protect the city from making this decision originally?
So that, Your Worship, the covenant that would be registered on title at the time of building would notify obviously the existing owner, but any future property owners of the risk, and that they would be assuming the liability. It removes that requirement from the city.
Okay, thank you very much.
If there are no other speakers, I'm going to say a few words. It would, given the current mood of council tonight and the delegations from Protection Island, the easiest thing in the world for me just to say nothing, go to the vote. It would be 8-1, and that would be the end of the evening. However, that is not my nature when it comes to matters like this. We listened to delegations in December. We have heard some more tonight. I have heard much made of the fact that the current purchasers, in the view of many, obtained this property at a less than appropriate market value. Frankly, that is utterly immaterial. We have heard criticism about what has happened or not happened on the island. We've had character questioned, all kinds of things, again, which are not material. This was a lot created in accordance with the law of the time. Subsequent legal restraints have put the current owner, as it did previous owners, in a position where they are entitled to at law and have indeed applied, and this is the third formal application to come before council, applied for a development permit, taking into account the rather unique nature of this land. I have heard speaker after speaker who've expressed great concern that with rising sea levels, that in these circumstances, any dwelling placed on it would be destroyed. But it occurred to me that no one has really addressed the common sense issue, although expressed by some tonight around the potential acquisition of this as a park. If the sea levels rise that high, it won't be much good as a park either. In the meantime, you have a family that is prepared to construct what can only be described as possibly the most modest dwelling one can imagine being constructed anywhere on a lot in the city of Nanaimo. Yes, it requires development permit variances. Absolutely, no question about it. But we have seen a significant report from staff that takes into account all of the concerns that have been expressed. If this island is subject to disaster, the Garry Oak will be gone in any event. It will not be available for public use, as it has apparently been. And I think, looking back to the previous application when this came before council several years ago, it was fairly clear that many people see this as a public amenity to be used accordingly. And certainly, Dr. Turer tonight indicated that is his feeling about what has happened since his family acquired the property. I do not believe that it is our right, regardless of what Councillor Hemmons referred to as our council's environmental leadership, to deny someone the opportunity to build on a property as what I have described already as a very modest dwelling. It is not our right to do so and sterilize their use of the property. Because in essence, what we are being asked to do tonight by particularly those who are opposed to this, is to acquire this as a public park. In a perfect world, and we had unlimited funds, wouldn't be a bad proposition. But when we already have 18% of Protection Island in parkland already, spending several $100,000 potentially to acquire this as parkland does not strike me as fair or reasonable. The fact is, if this council votes in the way that I have seen members indicate tonight by their various remarks, it will have the impact of sterilizing the use of this property. And let us not pretend for a moment, please, that you are going to get a better application before council with respect to dealing with all of the issues that have been raised. You're not touching the tombolo, you're only impacting the grassy meadow. You will have a family that obviously, if it proceeds, and this is inconsequential, I might add, obviously care for this property or anyone else who might acquire it if in fact this is approved or not approved. Applications can come back to this council in the future, but realistically, given the nature of the 3 previous applications, given that previous delegations pointed out and provided the video of council's previous consideration of this matter back in, what was it, 2004, I believe? November 2004. It's pretty clear this is as good as it gets. You've elevated the connections for sewer and water. You've restricted it to what I would describe as an incredibly modest footprint. Everything has been done. Staff have considered all of these issues. Mr. Lindsay has outlined the necessity of covenants respecting this property. I, for one, am not prepared to turn a situation where this council could approve a dwelling into a situation that invites litigation. So I will be opposing Councillor Gesselbrock's motion. I see Councillor Armstrong wishes to say something.
Yeah, sorry, you must have missed me. I too am
My
opposing.
apologies.
That's fine. I too am opposing for much the same reasons you are, just as I did with the Stevenson Point one, because I do believe it sterilizes the lot and I have concerns about that. Secondly, I am not a climate scientist by any means or any of that. And I did look at the report. We've got people that are trained and do have the credentials behind them to say that this is not an issue. So therefore I will not be in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Seeing no other speakers, those in favor of Councillor Gesselbrock's motion to deny the application development permit? Councillors Bonner, Martman, Thorpe, Gesselbrock, Brown, and Hemmons, and those opposed? Mayor Krogh, Councillor Armstrong, and Councillor Turley. The motion passes. Thank you. The next item is development permit application number DP 1208-497 Menzies Drive. Mr. Lindsay, is that you or will that be Mr. Holm?
Mr. Holm will introduce this item. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be recusing myself due to the business relationship with someone associated with the proponent's team. I just procedurally, I believe I just turn off my camera. If I'm incorrect in that, please
if you
let me
can
know.
just wait for Ms. Gurry's comments, Councillor Brown, first.
Councillor Brown, we're just going to place you in the waiting room until this item is over, and then we'll admit you back in.
I think we can proceed now. Councillor Brown's been sent to the waiting room.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship and Council. This is a development permit for property addressed at 497 Menzies Ridge Drive. It'll be familiar to Council as it was subject to a covenant amendment application in 2020. The covenant on the property at that time was amended to allow for 22 units. The proposal as presented here is for 22 units in the form of 7 buildings on the property. The property is zoned R6 and is neighborhood designated within the official community plan. If you could actually, bring up the context map, please, on the overhead, that would be helpful. You can see the property is located in the, thank you for that, the property is located in the Hawthorne development adjacent to Buttertubs Marsh. And if you could bring up attachment D, please, the site plan, that would be helpful to give the context there as well of how the property is proposed to be developed. So again, 22 units within 7 buildings, and the proposal includes a number of incentives, is inclusive of a number of incentives to achieve Tier 1 density bonusing incentives under the city's zoning bylaw, including public access pathway, increased building energy efficiency, and decreased water use, among other things. If you could bring up the building renderings, that would be great. The building design is contemporary and presents well on Menzies Ridge Drive and Bird Sanctuary Drive. The site plan, if you could bring up attachment G, the landscape plan and details. You can see the site plan incorporates a public access trailway that connects from Menzies Ridge Drive to Bird Sanctuary Drive. And the landscape plan also incorporates indigenous species that integrate well with the Buttertubs Marsh, which is adjacent to the property. So it includes elements that are complementary to the marsh and extends the indigenous vegetation into the site. Variances are requested to the minimum landscape treatment level and maximum fence height, so very minor variances are proposed, and the proposal is consistent with the city's applicable design guidelines, and staff support the proposal and requested variances. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. I'm not seeing any questions from anyone. Would someone care to make the recommended motion? Moved Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? Councillor Hemmons?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to note that I have met with some community members, and I know that this application has caused some challenges for the community to accept, but I think this is a really good example of a nice infill development. So I'm in full support of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Councillor Hemmons, if you can take your hand down, please. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you. If we can bring Councillor Brown back. Welcome back, Councillor Brown. We're on to rezoning application number RA 438-5707 Lost Lake Road. Mr. Holm, please.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This is our rezoning application, and if you could bring up the context map on the overhead, that would be helpful, or on the screen. and this property is this is an application from Street Design on behalf of Wu Shang Jun, and it's to rezone the property from R1 to R6 for a proposed townhouse development. The property is designated neighborhood in the official community plan, and as you can see, it's a triangular shaped parcel fronting on Lost Lake Road and Vandernook Road. And the proposal would rezone the property to R6 from the current R1, which would allow more efficient use of the property than subdivision would under existing zoning, and would also allow development that's consistent with the applicable official community plan policies for the neighborhood designated area. If you could bring up attachment C, please, the conceptual site plan. Again, this is conceptual at the rezoning stage and is just indicative of how the property could develop, obviously subject through, if it's successful in rezoning, subject through to subsequent development permit application. So again, a proposal that's consistent with applicable official community plan policy. The concept here is for 9 ground-oriented townhomes with the resulting density of 27 units per hectare, which is within the range identified as through the OCP. In this case, the applicant has held a public information meeting in November, and the comments received related to traffic and density proposed, as well as construction impacts, are outlined in the report. Should council support this bylaw at third reading, staff recommend a number of items be secured, including road dedication and as well as a community amenity contribution. In this case, the proposed community amenity contribution would be the extension of sidewalk on the south side of Lost Lake Road between the subject property and Alta Vista Drive. In the case that that sidewalk had been constructed by others at the time of building permit application, by that time the alternative would be for the owner to provide $1,000 per dwelling unit at that time directed towards active transportation improvements in the area. Again, the proposal is consistent with the applicable official community plan policies, and staff support the proposal as presented. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. This goes to the traffic, where you said that a crosswalk could be put in there. Who would be responsible for that? And would that be one that's got flashing lights? Because obviously we know there's many concerns up there. The speeding is consistently reported on. There's lots of vehicle traffic, minimum sidewalks, which is going to be addressed, I understand. But what are we going to do about that so that there is safety for pedestrians?
Thank you, Your Worship, to Councillor Armstrong's question. So I don't believe, unless I was mistaken, I don't believe I said a crosswalk would be installed. The proposal is to extend sidewalk on the south side of Lost Lake Road. So the property frontage would be sidewalk would be constructed through development of the property through building permit application. And then the community amenity contribution includes the extension of sidewalk road off-site to Alta Vista Drive. There is actually an existing crosswalk just to the east of the property before you reach Alta Vista Drive.
Okay, so is that the one that's referred to then in the transportation master plan comments?
I believe so.
Okay, I misunderstood that. I thought this was to be a new one that goes in. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong. If no further questions, someone care to make the recommended motion? Moved, Councillor Bonner.
Your Worship, if Councillor Bonner, I don't know if it's available for him to read it aloud. It is a bylaw. Thank you.
I can do that, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, I would recommend that zoning amendment bylaw 2022 number 4500.198 to rezone 5707 Lost Lake Road from single dwelling residential R1 to low density residential R6 to allow a multifamily residential development past first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. Councillors Gesselbrock and Brown. Anyone else? Not seeing any. Councillor Armstrong, are you opposed?
No.
No, sorry. All right. Motion carries. Councillor Bonner.
That zoning amendment bylaw 2022 number 4500.198 passed second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Councillors Bonner, Mayor Krog, leave them up, please. Councillors Martman, Thorpe, Armstrong, Turley, and Hemmens. Opposed? Councillors Gesselbrock and Brown. Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Council directs staff to secure road dedication and community amenity contributions should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Councillor Bonner, Mayor Krog, Councillor Martman, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Turley, Councillor Hemmens, Councillor Brown, and opposed? Councillor Gesselbrock, that's if you don't oppose, I assume it's your yes, yes?
Councillor Gesselbrock, could you
Sorry,
clarify?
in favor of the road dedication.
Thank you. All right, carries unanimously. We are now at what would normally be the recess time. Do we want 10 minutes? Yes, staff's indicating we do. I always take direction from staff on these matters. If we may, 10 minutes. We'll reconvene by the real clocks, 9:15. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our emergency routes, they are priority routes. They consist of roads that go to and from the hospitals, from the fire department stations, and from the BC ambulance stations. They're also their main commerce routes through the city of Nanaimo. So this allows commerce to happen during a snow event. So we hit those roads first. Once those are clear and open, then we move into the secondary roads, and then we move into the residential areas, which are dead-end roads and cul-de-sacs. And it can take up to 96 hours before we get into the residential areas. One of the side effects of plowing snow is it does end up on the sidewalk, and this can be very frustrating for homeowners and business owners that have just cleaned the sidewalk. It also pulls into their driveways. The crews try to keep it as close to the curb as they can, but we need to open the road right up to the curb to allow the drains to be exposed for when the snow starts to melt.
So this is one of our larger winter maintenance vehicles. They're very versatile in that they can be equipped with a lot of our different pieces of equipment. Right now this one has a front plow, a belly plow, as well as a salter or spreader box. We also have a brine unit that fits into this vehicle. This is the belly plow, and it's really good at removing hard-packed snow and ice. And then back up here to the front, we have what everyone is more familiar with. This front plow can push a lot of snow, so make sure that you slow down and keep your distance from the vehicles to ensure safety.
We have 17 vehicles that we use within the snow and ice operations for the city of Nanaimo. We also have an early shift that starts at 5 in the morning, and we have a night patrol, an afternoon shift, and an evening shift. They are eyes on the road, keeping us appraised of the conditions so that when the snow starts falling or ice starts forming on the roads, they can start salting and also call for other resources and mobilize the crews out.
This is one of the City of Nanaimo Public Works snow and ice control vehicles. And this is actually set up for a brining unit right now, or anti-icing. And what brine is a 23.3% sodium chloride solution. And it comes out of the spray bars down here at the bottom, and it's made here at the Public Works yard. It's a proactive method of snow and ice control, as when we know that there's a winter storm coming, we can actually lay this down on the road prior to the event.
By putting the brine down before the snow comes, it buys time. It lets us get on the roads, and then when we hit it with the plows, it doesn't stick. The snow doesn't stick, it comes off much easier. Whereas if we didn't brine, the snow has an opportunity to freeze to the road.
So another benefit of the brining or anti-icing unit is that during the frosty mornings, we can have it drive down the road, and then immediately the frost disappears as they're applying the brine.
Brine's a great tool for us. It's very cost effective. We can stretch our hard-pressed tax dollars to the maximum. We can make brine for cents on the dollar.
So the other thing that we ask is that everyone stays back from these anti-icing or any winter maintenance vehicles, as they have limited visibility and it's poor conditions out there, and they're trying to maneuver around everything. So just stay back and give them a little bit of room to operate and clear the roads.
So here we are in the Public Works Yard, City of Nanaimo, and what you look around, you can see our various tools that we use for snow and ice fighting. We have tandem trucks, 4x4 trucks, we have backhoes. All our trucks are capable of having front plows on them, and the larger trucks we have belly plows on them as well, and they all have a salter sander that can be mounted on the back.
This is another tool in our winter maintenance fleet. It's a salting machine. And what happens is that the salt gets loaded into this hopper, and on this conveyor where it gets hit with these two saddle tanks, which are full of brine. Then it comes out here on the spreader. And why we add the brine is that it reduces the amount of spray from the salt, so it doesn't bounce nearly as far, saving about 20 to 30% of our salt. As well, by using the anti-icing liquid on the salt, the activation starts right as it hits the road.
The purpose of the salt is to keep the roads bare, keep the ice from forming on the road. Again, safety for everyone, including ourselves and the public. That's why we put the salt down.
Today we're talking about clearing catch basins or road drains on residential roads. The first thing to understand is where the catch basin is in proximity to your residence. When clearing a catch basin or road drain, we want to make sure that you make yourself visible and aware of oncoming traffic. When clearing snow or debris from a catch basin, we ask that you put it in an area where it will not plug the catch basin again, not placing it on an already shoveled driveway or sidewalk. Sandbags are available at 2020 Labio Road 24/7. Just remember to make sure you bring a shovel. The City of Nanaimo and Public Works appreciate your help in keeping your catch basins clear. Thank you.
On snow days like this, the city of Nanaimo sends out a fleet of plows. How well equipped are these trucks?
They're really well equipped. We all have plows and sanders on them. We come with a belly plow too, so we're well prepared once we get a big snow like this. A lot of waves, a lot of friendly faces. People are pretty happy when you come and rescue them and clear off their road. So on our maps to determine where we go, we follow our red routes, which are our bus routes and our major routes, and they're first. Then our secondary routes are in purple, followed lastly by our side streets, which are in yellow. We try not to cover a nicely shoveled driveway, but sometimes we don't really have an option, and it's unfortunate. We're not trying to do it on purpose.
In some cases, the plows can't scrape heavily packed or iced snow right down to the surface of the pavement.
Gonna have to see a few more, or we don't have quorum.
I think your dancing may have scared them away.
I know Councillor Bonner's there, so we have 5. Thank you very much. I'd like just to resume with item H, which is liquor license application number LA 145-1431 Bowen Road. Mr. Home.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a request from Nadine Holdings Limited on behalf of the Quarterway Pub to seek a council resolution to amend an existing liquor license for the existing Quarterway Pub to permit an outdoor patio to be permanently established. The subject property is the location of the Quarterway Pub, and actually a pub's been operating on the site since 1879. 40-seat temporary patio was established for the 2020 and 2021 seasons under summer seasons under the LCRB, the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Board's pandemic allowances for temporary outdoor patios. In order to create a permanent patio where the temporary patio currently exists, the the owner is required to seek to make an application to the LCRB and to seek a council resolution to do so. This report is just intended to provide council with some information regarding the proposal and to allow council to be aware of the proposal before we undertake public notification to gather views of nearby residents and businesses on the proposal. Following the notification, a summary of the comments and evaluation of community impacts identified will be brought forward to council for consideration along with a subsequent report. I'm happy to take questions, but
thank you very much, Mr. Holm. Councillor Hemmens has a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Holmes, is this something that we can anticipate from other establishments that took advantage of the temporary outdoor patio regulations? I'm sorry, I'm not sure the word. But do you think we can see more of these coming forward in the future?
Yeah, hard to be certain, but through Your Worship to Councillor Hemmens, hard to be certain, but it wouldn't surprise me. Hopefully the program was met with some success for the businesses and did provide an opportunity actually for them to to prove out the temporary patios were effective economically, and also to prove out any potential community impacts. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we did see additional requests to make some of these temporary patios permanent.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. I think that's all. I don't see any other questions from anyone. The next item is the approval of the Nanaimo Yacht Club lease renewal, -400 Newcastle Avenue. And Mr. Corson, good evening.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Been waiting a long time.
Your Worship.
Yes, Councillor Bonner, sorry.
I have to step out for this one.
Very good. Yes, you advised. Thank you. You'll be consigned to the waiting room, as I understand it.
Story.
That was fast. It's easier than being sent to detention. Mr. Corson, please proceed.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if you could bring up attachment A for illustrative purposes. It just has a map which shows the land ownership. Thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, so tonight staff are seeking council's approval to set the rent for the Nanaimo Yacht Club lease for the next 5 years. If you look on the map, you'll see the Yacht Club lease just over 2 acres of land and water from the city of Nanaimo. And the lease area is part of the larger 12-acre property, which includes land and water leased from the Port Authority, as well as a fee simple strip that's owned by the Yacht Club themselves. The current 30-year lease commenced in 2007 and requires a rent review every 5 years. We're just starting this next period, which is 2022 to 2026. Through this process, staff engaged an appraiser who determined the market rent to be just under $180,000 per annum. Under the lease, the city has a discretion to provide a discount in recognition of the Yacht Club's contribution to the community. And the Yacht Club have provided their rationale for this discount in attachment B. And this includes the economic impact from visiting vessels, their junior sailing program, and contributions around walkway maintenance and rental of the hull. The necessary statutory notifications taking place, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corson. Any questions from council for Mr. Corson? I am not seeing any. As Councillor Bonner stepped out, would someone care to read the recommended motion?
Your Worship, I do have a question.
Yes, Councillor Turley, sorry.
That's okay. Through you to Mr. Corson, the actual building, the Yacht Club building, is that on the leased land or is that on Port Authority land? I'm having trouble telling from the map here.
Yeah, thank you. Through your Worship to Councillor Turley. Yes, so the Yacht Club building itself is on city land.
Okay, thank you. And do they pay taxes on that portion of it or not?
Yes, they do.
Thank you.
Someone going to make the motion?
So moved.
Moved Councillor Turley, seconded Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And contrary? Councillor Gesselbrock, are you voting or deemed in favor?
Favor.
In favor?
In favor.
Thank you very much. Unanimous, I believe, Ms. Gurry. The next is approval of articles of incorporation and shareholder agreement for the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation.
I think we need to invite Councillor Bonner back in.
Yes. Well, they'll admit him like magic. Look at that.
Okay. There he is.
I want you to know, Councillor Bonner, Councillor Turley insisted we bring you back.
Don't sound so shocked.
I feel bad for all those old man jokes about him.
So the approval of articles of incorporation and shareholder agreement for the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation. Mr. Corson, back to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So very happy to be here this evening to seek Council's formal approval to establish the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation. The corporation was a recommendation from the Economic Development Function Service Review, which Council undertook at the beginning of this term. And that service review recommended a hybrid approach to economic development, which would include an external agency being set up, the corporation. Following that, Council established a task force, the Economic Development Task Force, to work with the city's partners to further develop what this corporation could look like. And they developed a charter, which was kind of the framework for this entity. Council approved that charter last February, almost a year ago. And since then, staff have been working with our shareholders to develop the more detailed articles of incorporation and the shareholder agreement, which are attached to your staff report. Just go over the high notes of the corporation. The corporation is owned by the City of Nanaimo as a Class A shareholder, and then Snuneymuxw First Nation, the Port Authority, the airport, the Chamber of Commerce are Class B shareholders, and Vancouver Island University is a Class C shareholder. Each of the Class B shareholders are going to contribute $10,000 per annum, and the Class C shareholder VIU, because of their charitable status, is not able to make a contribution to a corporation. The board will have 9 directors, 6 from the owners, so the city, Snuneymuxw, the Port Authority, the airport, the chamber, and VIU, and then 3 members at large. The term for each member is 2 years, and we're pretty much ready to get going on it. We've been working on getting the necessary background documents in place for this. In the recommendation, you'll see that we're seeking council direction to appoint a councillor who will be a non-voting member to the board. This is in addition to a senior staff member who will be a voting member on the board itself. Should council approve the resolutions this evening, the intention is to hold the inaugural meeting soon. We've given ourselves a timeline to make sure we have it up and running by the end of March this year. Happy to answer any questions on the specifics.
Looking for questions?
I think Councillor Turley might have his hand up.
Councillor Turley?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Corson. Now, I have to admit I speed read the legalese quite quickly, so I may have missed this, but under 11.3 quorum, it makes reference to a meeting of the shareholders, the quorum being 5, but it doesn't, I don't see anywhere it makes a reference to what the quorum is for the board of directors, which has more members. And did I miss something?
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor Turley. And there's different voting weights as well in there as well. You've probably noticed, depending on the issue that's at hand.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
So yeah, the quorum is 5. Even though we've got the 6, we should always have 6 with our shareholders there plus the other 3. So you are correct. The quorum is 5.
So, but that's 5 for both a shareholders meeting and a board of directors meeting. Is that correct? Or are they one in the same?
One in the same, absolutely. Yeah. So our intention would be to advertise for the directors, the 3 additional directors quickly, so that we don't have too many meetings without the full 9 there.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no further questions, I'll ask someone to make the motion, except that as opposed to the way it's worded for the recommended motion, that it actually say in paragraph 2, appoint Councillor Jim Turley as a non-voting member to the board, etc. Councillor Bonner is making that motion. It is seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Councillor Turley, and thank you to Councillor Martman for supporting Councillor Turley in this and having co-chaired the committee that led to the creation of this entity. So work well done, and glad to see it moving along. The next item...
Wait.
Sorry, Councillor Martman, pardon me.
Thank you. If I just wanted to speak to this for a moment. So congratulations, Councillor Turley. And I'm looking forward to the outcome of the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation. I just wanted to speak briefly to, hopefully to the public out there and to Councillor Turley and to the shareholders, that we make sure we keep the donut economic model top of mind. That we have had these conversations throughout the task force, and I believe in the guiding principle of keeping within the ecological ceiling and ensuring that the social foundation needs are met within our city. So yes, we want to build a prosperous economy, but we want to make sure we build it right. So I just needed to add my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martman. We're now on to bylaws. One only, school site acquisition charges bylaw 2021 number 7338. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. That's school site acquisition charges bylaw 2021 number 7338 to require the payment of school site acquisition charges on developments of 2 and 3 residential units be adopted.
And we have a seconder, Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. We have no notices of motion tonight. Under other business, we have a request from Councillor Hemmons, re Local Government Leadership Academy Training.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Thorpe inspired me, and I would like to attend the February conference of LGLA, and I need your permission to do so.
Following great leadership, moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. I think it's safe to say we have no questions tonight. So the next motion is one that I know all of you enjoy making at this time of the evening. Who wants to go? So you want to stay meeting? Nobody wants to move adjournment. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bonner. Yes, very good. And seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you to staff for working us through the first of our fully Zoomed meetings, save for my presence, where we've managed to stumble to the end of this proceeding tonight. Thank you.